All right, well, if everything went planned, we are live. Jacob Burton here, broadcasting for the first time from our new studio kitchen, which we call our lab here at the Renaissance Reno Downtown Hotel. Pretty cool. Mackenzie here. Mackenzie, why don't you say hi? She's our producer, also one of my junior Sues. She's been helping me out here. Why don't you go ahead and give them a quick little tour of all those different camera shots we got going on. So you can see we got all sorts of different camera feeds set up so we can do a live cooking class in here as we rock and roll. Now, this is the first time I have done anything like this, really. And one of the things that we have to do is just get in here and hit that live button and rock and roll. So probably be a little bit rough around the edges, but really the whole purpose of this class is to show you a couple of different things that you can do for some fried rice and also stir-fried chicken using some fun techniques, starting with a whole chicken, which we're going to break down here right now. So we'll start with this whole chicken, and this will allow us to make a bit of a stock here, and we'll do the stock in the pressure cooker, so we'll get everything going pretty quickly. And whole chicken's a great place for a lot of students to start because it gives you a bunch of different components that you can play with and practice your various techniques. So you can do low and slow on the legs. You can practice roasting on the legs. You can roast the bird whole, obviously. The breast itself, you can pan roast. You can stir fry. So it gives you just a ton of different options that are really good for the beginning cook or even the advanced cook to play around with. And any chef who thinks chicken's boring or doesn't like working with chicken is not to be trusted. These gloves are like top quality right now. So there's this thing where you have like the curse of the live stream. And Mackenzie, how many different tests have we done? Look at these gloves.
So many tests.
Every single one.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to get a rebate on those. We've done like 6 different live streams, and hang on, new pack. Oh, so we've done a bunch of tests, 0 issues, and then starting today, I was trying to go live at 2. We had connectivity issues. YouTube wasn't wanting to see my cameras, even though it worked flawlessly before. Now I had a batch of gloves. There we go. That was breaking. All right. So let's go ahead and break this bad boy down here. Mackenzie, as I'm getting set up, if you wouldn't mind grabbing some 9 pans from over here,
yeah,
and running them over. All right, so whole chicken. I have videos on how to break down a whole chicken that are a little bit slower, so we're just going to kind of go through the motions here. I have the giblets set aside for something that we'll be working on here in a second. So I like to start by just removing these flaps. Makes it a lot easier. Go ahead and pop it right there for me, thank you. To see your leg and thigh portion. And then a lot of the times, I'll just start by Frenching this wing, by cutting around and popping it off. And that's going to give us the start to our airline chicken breast. Cut down on either side of the leg and thigh right there. Pop those joints out of place. Come down, hit that joint there, pull out the oyster, and that's our leg and thigh. Now, we'll go ahead and save these leg and thighs for something else later on down the road. What we're really after here is our chicken breast, which we'll take the skin off of. I like to detach these tenders here because they cook at a different rate, so we'll save those 2. In fact, we'll just take those tenders and throw them into our chicken stock here that we're going to make in a second. Do the joint. Tender removed. Now at this point, you can take this wing nub here, this first joint, and go ahead and cut that out. That can be chicken lollipops or chicken wings, whatever you want to do with it. Save those in the freezer for later. And then we'll go ahead and remove the skin, because we won't need that in our stir fry. Move the skin. Now we'll take this breast here and just kind of cut it against how the grain runs. So you can see the grain on this chicken breast kind of runs horizontally, but at a little bit of an angle coming down on this side. All right. So what we'll do is we'll just give these nice thin slices kind of going across that grain. And that's going to make the chicken itself seem more tender when we go to cook it up here in a little bit. So we'll get this going first and get our alkaline marinade for the stir fry. And then we'll start getting into some fried rice. Okay, so prep our chicken. And again, this is a really good sort of series of dishes that you can do to practice a couple of different drills. First of all, your meat fabrication, which is breaking down the chicken. If you can break down a chicken, you can really break down anything. It's just about scaling, because the chicken teaches you how to find joints and go through joints. It teaches you how to find bones and ride that bone. And you can also practice with finding how the fibers run and cutting against the fibers to create something more tender. Okay. So over here, I need to grab a mixing bowl. Now I'm also going to pause here real quick. And let's go ahead and get, and this is also my first time using these. I found these burners in storage downstairs. So we'll see how good these actually work. So we're going to use a pressure cooker, which I love to cook my stocks in pressure cookers. It just makes everything a lot faster. So it takes the stock cooking from 4 to 6 hours, sometimes longer, down to about 45 minutes. So we'll go ahead and throw this guy in there. We'll throw our wing nubs in there, our tenders in there, and our wing tips. And we'll go ahead and set these leg and thighs aside for something later. Now I'm going to start by covering these with some water. And this is just to blanch it. So normally when you're making like a roasted chicken stock, you roast it, you cover it with water after the roasting process, and then you can just go through and make your stock, right? With this, because we're doing a lighter version of a stock, which is our white chicken stock, we're going to blanch it first. That's going to help to coagulate the proteins, and the protein coagulation is going to give us a cleaner stock overall. Okay? So next, we're going to go ahead and get the chicken marinated while we're waiting for all this other stuff to happen. All right, so chicken goes in the bowl. And while I have a dirty cutting board, I'm going to go ahead and chop up my giblets here, which we'll use the giblets later on in some fried rice. So here I just have the heart and the liver and the gizzard. So I'm just going to mince these guys. And we'll set this aside. So, Mackenzie, if there's any questions that come in as we're going, feel free to stop me.
One person said, 30 years after seeing Martignon break down a chicken, I finally tried it myself a few months ago and got it.
Hang on, you gotta get a little bit louder than that. I can't hear you over here.
Louder?
Yeah.
Top Feed Coco said, 30 years after seeing Martignon break down chicken, I finally tried it myself a few months ago and got down to 30 seconds.
Nice.
That's pretty impressive. Everyone else is just saying hello.
All right, so we'll go ahead and set these aside. Give me 1 second to get cleaned up here. And then on with the show. Now, even though there's some natural sort of dead spots in this presentation because we're cooking everything in real time, I think the value of it too is for people like you or anyone who's tuning in to see the workflow from start to finish and how we'll get things going, like get a stock going first, get our mise en place going first, and then how quick everything comes together right at the end. So with this stir fry dish, with our chicken breast, and you can very easily use your chicken thighs as well. You can bone them and take off the skin, cut them into slices. But we're going to do a basic alkaline marinade on this using baking soda and egg whites. And what that does is, so the alkaline marinade, or the pH of the egg white and the baking soda, when you raise the pH of meat, it makes it more tender, and also makes it brown easier, and it makes it more fragrant. So here I'm using just the egg white. This egg white's going to add some coating to allow the rest of our marinade to stick to it.
Someone is asking, for what applications would you use dark roasted chicken stock versus a light chicken stock?
It's a great question. So generally speaking, when you want the chicken, so chicken stock itself, like a white chicken stock, is a really good background flavor that you can add stuff to. So I'll use a lot of white chicken stock when I'm making delicate stir-fry sauces where I don't necessarily want it to have a dark color or a strong roasted chicken flavor. Well, in this case, that's exactly what we're doing, is we want to have a stir-fry sauce that it kind of just binds everything together, right? It doesn't take center stage. Versus a roasted stock, I'll make a roasted stock for heavier dishes and also for full reduction. So I'll do like a roasted shallot chicken reduction for a pan roasted chicken breast or pan roasted leg and thigh. So really the application is how forward do you want your chicken stock to be? So here's a little bit of baking soda. So this baking soda, again, is going to help to raise our pH. And you don't want to put too much, okay? Just enough to kind of very gently coat the chicken itself. And we'll mix that in here in a second. And also a little bit of garlic powder. And really what's important to remember is the egg white and your baking soda, those are your active ingredients. Everything else that I'm adding besides the salt here is going to be basically a subjective ingredient, or an ingredient that's chosen based on the flavor structure that you're overall going for, okay? So we have the dry ingredients in there. You can add soy to this as well. Don't add anything acidic. Don't add any like vinegar or anything, because it's going to combat with the actual baking soda itself. And then I think I got all my nice finishing salts right there. What about just some good old kosher salt? Do I have a 9-pin on that somewhere?
Yeah, back on the
right in the back there by the stove.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful, thank you.
Suzanne would like to know why not use the giblets in the stock.
Oh, you could absolutely use the giblets in the stock. But for me, I love the giblet flavor. So we're going to make, if we have enough time, we're going to make some fried rice with the giblets in it as well. All right, so also in this marinade, I like to add just a little bit of oil. This is our garlic oil that you see us use a lot. And then I'm also going to use, here it is. So I like to use Chinese cooking wine in my marinade. So just a little dash of some Chinese cooking wine. You could use like a sherry as well. If you can't find the Chinese cooking wine. Now you can see this marinade isn't very moist. All right. Well, why don't we just go ahead and move over here, Mackenzie, to this camera. May as well, right? Since I keep on coming over here for all my ingredients. Okay, that's a little better. So what I want to do too, though, is I want to add just a little bit of cornstarch to this mix. And the cornstarch is going to help the marinade itself cling to the protein. But also what's going to happen is when we go to stir fry this later, the protein from the egg white and the starch in the cornstarch is going to set a very thin coating on the outside of the chicken itself or whatever protein you're using. And when that coating sets, you basically have like this starch protein moisture barrier that's going to absorb the protein, or excuse me, absorb the liquid that's extruded from the protein when you cook it, keeping it moist, and also help to allow the sauce to cling, right? And that's part of what gives that perception of juiciness in these stir-fry dishes when done right, is the fact that you have that starch coating. All right, so we'll sit this in here.
Ricky would like to know, does wine make the chicken acidic?
What's that?
Does wine make it acidic?
Yeah. So technically, yeah, wine is a little bit acidic, but just a couple of dashes for flavor isn't going to throw off the pH enough. Versus acid will have an actual reaction. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's head over here. Let's check to see if this guy is getting close to a boil. We're almost there. So in the meantime, so we can get this stock rocking and rolling, I'm going to chop up a little bit of Mirepoix. So our carrot, celery, and onions.
Nickel with the mustache would like to know if you're going to keep doing podcasts.
I am planning on doing podcasts. In fact, the podcasts are my favorite thing to do. And I think they're a great supplement to the overall videos. So yeah, podcasts to come. And we probably won't do the video podcast because I was thinking about it recently. And I really just like the intimacy of being able to sit in a dark room with my studio mic and kind of have that one-on-one conversation with people. Because for me, when I listen to podcasts, I like to listen to podcasts on the go. I listen to a lot of podcasts when I'm prepping in the kitchen. I also listen to podcasts when I'm gardening or working out. So to me, the video element just kind of adds a whole nother level of complexity to it that really isn't necessary. Unless you're actually doing a cooking demonstration like this. Then I think it makes a lot of sense. All right, so we're just rough cutting our Mirepoix here. That's not the greatest looking onion. Now I prefer, when I use onions for my Mirepoix, to leave the skin on. I think it adds a little bit of a nice sort of earthy flavor. But for those professional chefs out there that generate a lot of skins when they're, you're prepping a whole bag, like 50-pound bag of onions, don't just take all those skins and throw them into your stock. Okay, your stock is not a trash can. The skins need to be in ratio to the flesh of the onion. Okay, so we have our Mirepoix set. Now also, what's important for a stock such as this is green onions and some garlic and ginger. So I have some scallions right over here. And this is, normally how the scallions look when you buy them from the supermarket and they sit in your fridge for a couple of days. They tend to kind of get a little bit limp and wilted up here. You can stop that by, wrapping them in a wrung out paper towel that you get damp and kind of wring it out and wrap it up and put it in a Ziploc bag. That'll help it to keep fresh longer. But also, too, I'll just go through, I'll trim these ends off, I'll trim these stems off, and we'll add those to our stock. And it'll add a nice overall flavor to everything that we're doing. So we'll just square these off here.
Derek says, my cornstarch-based sauces often turn runny after refrigerating. Any tips to prevent that when having leftovers?
Say that again?
My cornstarch-based sauces often turn runny after refrigerating. And any tips to prevent that?
So your cornstarch-based sauces, so thickened by cornstarch, turn runny after refrigerating. That's odd because normally they get thicker. So they should be getting thicker as the starch cools because the starch fully gelatinizes at colder temperatures. So it could be that the starch or the sauce itself is possibly separating and breaking if you have like a high fat content sauce. I would have to see the actual sauce and the recipe that you're following to really nail that down. All right. Go ahead and clean these tips off here. Strip that guy down. Set that aside.
Top Feed Coco wants to know if you can finely julienne green onions for a top garnish. Do a show.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'd be happy to do that. As you can see, Mackenzie loves to Gorilla Glue these things together for the live streams. So the way that I would do a green onion for a top garnish, since we already have these out here, I like to cut them on the bias, so something like this. And this is just where your guide hand knife skills is going to really come into play. So you got to get nice and close up, right, using your claw technique, using the professional pinch grip. I have lots of videos on that, okay? And what you want to do is use like a pushing, rocking motion, so you're using the full slicing action of your blade, and you're going to sacrifice one end, right? So you can cut them on a bias like that. And even these are nice. So like when you talk about plating, you plate in threes. So you can, like, if you have like 3 individual chicken lollipops, you can lean those up against it, right? Or you could always just cross cut really thin like that. Or you can cross cut the whites of your onions really thin like that. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for the overall garnish. So for our fried rice, I love to have charred green onions in all my stir fries, but especially my fried rice. And I like to kind of cut them into larger sections.
Ananon would like to know, is there a flavor difference when doing a stock in a pressure cooker versus a stock pot, or is it purely just for time?
It's purely just for time. There are some arguments to be made where actually a pressure cooker has a better extraction. In the Modernist Cuisine series, they make an argument that if you allow the pressure cooker to come down to pressure naturally, so you don't vent it when it's done, but you actually let it drop naturally, that it helps to keep more of the aroma in, which, I mean, on paper, technically, probably, yes, that's true. But what are you going to do with that stock when it's done? You're going to take it and probably rip it down, right? You're going to use it as a reduction. So, yeah, the pressure cooker itself does a great job of extracting, and you can get things done really fast. So a lot of times when I'm at home and we eat roasted chicken for dinner, we'll save all the bones. We'll throw them in the pressure cooker, and I'll make a stock before I go to bed, right? Just 45 minutes, done. Good to go. If I don't have time to strain it, I can just strain it the next day. And here we are. We are boiling. So now we'll take this over here. So you can see, let's just get an overhead shot of this real quick.
All right.
Mackenzie. So you can see all the schmutz. Actually, let's go to camera 5. So you can see all the schmutz right here, right? So that would be in your stock if you didn't blanch this first, right? So we want to come over here. We'll give this a quick drain off.
Succulents Culinary says, we recently butchered some of our farm-raised pigs and the meat is fatty and well marbled. What is the best way to prepare chops that need to be balanced for the richness?
I'm having a hard time hearing you over the fan. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
We might need like one of those producer mics.
Yeah.
If you want to shout at me again, I'll.
Succulents Culinary says that they butchered some of their pigs and the meat is really fatty and like very marbled. And they want to know what the best way to balance that is, to balance the pork.
Okay. Well, it depends on the dish that you're doing with it. We're gonna slice up some ginger here while I think about it. But when you go straight back to basics, right? The basics of fat is cut by acid, by bitter, and by heat. So if you're doing a dish with a piece of meat that has a high fat content, you're going to want to incorporate into that dish something bitter, something spicy, or something sour, right? Something acidic. One of my favorite things to do is I love to just take frisée, which is a type of endive, and toss it with some olive oil and some sherry vinegar, whatever flavor structure you're looking for, and it's used as a garnish. That's usually your fastest way. Do I have a board scraper around here so I can set a good example?
There's some
down here. Yep, there we go. So the fastest way is to basically do a some sort of garnish that's going to help to cut through that. Endive is good because endive is naturally bitter. Heat is nice. So we're going to go ahead and load this up here. Mackenzie, don't let me forget the minced garlic.
Don't forget the minced garlic.
So we got our basic Mirepoix in there. Got our shallots in there. Our green onion trimmings. And then if I didn't already have minced garlic prepped by Mackenzie here, which I already removed from right here, then I would just take whole cloves and I would smash them down.
Daniel, there's two Daniels asking questions. So the first one, he wants to know, what are good resources for learning how to plate?
There aren't many, but we plan on doing them because that's one of the most common requests that I get for video production is plating techniques. So we're going to make that a part of our upcoming boot camp series that we're doing, and we'll shoot some video in here too. Because once you learn the basics, in fact, we should probably just do like a live stream of plating. I'd have to think about how I'm going to do that. But yeah, once you learn the basics, it's pretty straightforward until you start getting into real avant-garde stuff. But the real avant-garde stuff is more artistic anyways, right? So once you learn the basics of like drawing circles and shading and lighting and all that sort of stuff that you're sketching, then taking your drawings to the next level is all on you and your own artistic expression. So I'm going to go ahead and move this guy over to our back stove just to free up some counter space here.
And then Daniel, the second Daniel, advice for a line cook about to enter the world of upscale dining from a fast-paced sandwich shop.
So he's currently in a fast-paced sandwich shop and he wants to enter fine dining?
Yep.
Well, all those skills that you know at the sandwich shop, they're universal. They just don't have the same sort of, I want to say discipline for lack of a better term, but it's not that. 'Cause it doesn't mean you're not a disciplined individual and you don't work hard, but there's just a different level at which you're expected to perform to in a fine dining setting. And that could get rough, especially if your current position is you're somebody who is really good at the sandwich shop and you're kind of a leader. And if you're interested in fine dining and you're working in a sandwich shop, I'd assume that you're kind of in that leadership position. So really the best way to break in is just to go into fine dining and to work. So the best way to break in is doing what I'm doing right now, right? This live stream, I knew from the get-go I was going to broadcast it and it was probably going to be shit, right? I mean, you guys might enjoy it because hopefully you're learning a few things here and there. But at the end of the day, you just got to do it, right? You got to do something. You got to get the ball going and then just trust in the fact that if you do something enough, eventually you're going to get good at it, right? I often talk about the analogy of doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because when you do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, everyone sucks at it. So we're going to prep these mushrooms here by removing the stem and the gills. And if you want to be good at something, you have to be willing to humble yourself and show up and get your butt kicked, right? Whether it's in a professional kitchen, whether it's in a new sport or a new hobby, you know. And we talk a lot about the valley of despair, right? Where people, they get into something, they think it's going to be easy, and then they enter the valley of despair because they realize how hard it actually is. The Dunning-Kruger effect, right? But as you work your way through that valley of despair, you naturally get better and better. But you have to dedicate yourself to getting better. So that's my advice there. I started off when I was in culinary school, working for free for 1.5 years at a Michelin restaurant in San Francisco. And it was really, really hard. And I had zero experience. I had no business being there, right? So I started off for free cleaning the grease traps and doing dishes and then doing some prep. And eventually they learn to trust you and they give you more and more. And I learned a ton there. I learned a lot about technique. I learned a lot about just how to conduct myself in a professional kitchen. I learned that you're only as good as the last plate you serve, right? And that discipline, because when you're in the weeds and you say to yourself, oh, that's good enough, I'm just going to send it. In fine dining, it's not good enough, right? You shouldn't send it. And to have that discipline is really the difference. So we're going to slice up these mushrooms here into a long julienne. This is going to be for our chicken dish.
Tony would like to know what your favorite dessert is.
It always changes. I like, I'm kind of a fruit-based guy. Although a couple years ago, I developed a maple Snickers ice cream that is just outrageous, that I absolutely love. And it's basically just a good vanilla ice cream base that, oh, by the way, real quick while I'm doing this. So because this is kind of like a homey sort of stir fry, I'm just kind of slicing, and you can see I get jagged edges. In a more professional environment, like a fine dining kitchen, you'd want to take this edge here and trim it off. Then this edge becomes mushroom stock or mushroom fumet, or mushrooms add a lot of umami to things, right? So you put that in your stock or into a fumet, and then when you come back to slice this, you get a much nicer slice. So anyways, desserts. Yeah, so that maple Snickers ice cream was just basically a really good homemade vanilla ice cream base. And I swapped out the sugar for pure maple sugar, which is just ridiculously good. And then add some chunks of chopped up Snickers right at the end. So I think in the future, I'm going to need just like a gang of mise en place pans just right in front and center. Problem is, if I have a whole like stack of mise en place pans, it kind of gets in the way of the camera shoot. But we'll play with that. Mm-hmm. We're just playing and learning. All right. Mushrooms are done. I'm going to stick these in the fridge for now to kind of get them out of the way. Now, let's go ahead and start our fried rice. So this is the first time I've actually used these burners for the fried rice. We're going to do the scrambled eggs first. I'm going to pull up an induction pan here to cook these scrambled eggs. Now, you'll see different approaches when doing fried rice. And a lot of people, they'll take their fried rice and they'll cook the egg in it. That never works for me. It always just becomes a little bit too eggy as far as the egg kind of coagulates against the rice itself. So especially when I'm cooking at home, I like to cook everything separate. So we'll go ahead and start this guy here. Medium heat on this nonstick pan. Now, a common question that I get is like, what is medium heat? What is low heat? What is high heat? Right? And it's going to be different with every burner. But the question instead of like, what is Chef Jacob's version of medium heat? Right? Instead of asking that question, you should be looking at what is the purpose of medium heat? What is the purpose of low heat? What is the purpose of high heat? So the purpose of low heat is to cook something low and slow or to simmer it gently. So you're doing gentle cooking. The purpose of medium heat, like something where I'm cooking eggs like this, is the low heat is going to be too low to give me an even heat distribution around this pan. So I want the pan to be just hot enough where it's evenly hot, but not so hot that's going to brown and burn my eggs before the protein in my eggs is fully coagulated. High heat, of course, is for searing, which is also why you'll commonly see when you're using a searing process, unless you're using like thin cuts of meat, you're going to have a two-step cooking process, right? So like if you're searing a filet, I got 6 eggs here that I pre-cracked, so just 6 regular eggs. So when you're searing a filet, you're going to finish it in the oven because the outside of the steak is going to brown before you actually fully cook the inside.
That's perfect, because Tony wants to know, why do upscale or ordinary steakhouses not just prep a ton of sous vide steaks then sear them off to order, since sous vide steaks are miles better and can hold a while?
Well, sous vide steaks, miles better. I mean, that's kind of debatable. Now, the interior execution of perfection is better. But really, when it comes to like a ribeye, the perfect ribeye or the perfect steak, in my opinion, is one that has a really nice crust, and that is cooked from start to finish with high heat, and then you let it rest. You get a different texture. So the texture on sous vide meat it's more even all the way through, which is kind of the whole purpose of it. But that evenness of cook sort of gives the meat a lack of character and interest. A filet mignon, I think, is kind of better sous vide overall. For the most part, but like a lamb rack is really much better pan roasted. Now, the other reason too is first of all, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? So you have these steakhouses that have been doing the same thing for years and years. Second is the HACCP plans required. Multiple things going on. I got the eggs scrambling, moving those off the heat. We got this guy coming up to town. I'm going to turn down our stock. And then Mackenzie, if you can start like a 45-minute timer-ish.
Yep.
Move this back. So when you're in a professional environment, because you are vacuum sealing, so you're removing the oxygen from the environment, and you're cooking at a low heat, you need what's called a HACCP plan. And the HACCP plans are really involved. They're a total pain in the ass. They require a lot of oversight from your local health department. So unless you really, really, really have to cook something sous vide, it's not worth the hassle. And also, too, beyond sous vide, really, if you wanted to do that, I would actually forego the circulator itself and just do a combi oven. Combi ovens are where it's at. And then you can pull the steak without it having to have a bag directly from the combi, long shot. And when you do that, your workflow is a lot better, right? Because you're able to just pull straight from the combi oven. You're already at your perfect mid-rare and sear and go. So we're going to take these scrambled eggs. We're going to set them aside. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a huge fan of sous vide. But sous vide is nothing more than just a cooking technique, right? And people got really excited that they had a really hard time hitting a mid-rare steak on a continual basis. So they just stopped trying and started to cook stuff sous vide. So it's like the old adage, like when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So everyone started to cook everything sous vide. And I think they kind of lost the forest for the trees. Okay. So our first fried rice we're going to do is some shrimp. So this is some 1620 shrimp that we just cut up into some chunks. And again, I like to stir fry everything separate because it helps me to control the heat. And we don't have big professional jet burners here, right? So you can get away with doing everything from start to finish in a large... I think my other burner is a little bit hotter. Let's see. So you can get away with doing everything from start to finish if you have like 100,000 BTU burner, but at home you're going to have more like a 15 to 12,000 BTU burner. So you're going to want to do everything in stages. So I'll pull over here my garlic oil.
Daniel would like to know, what do you find the sous vide is best for?
Holding our hollandaise hot.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
I mean, that's about what we use sous vide for. In our restaurant is holding hollandaise hot. If you're a home cook and you want to do like I don't know, steaks for 12 people, I mean, sous vide steak isn't bad, right? And it's all about execution. So the vast majority of people, they can't pan roast 12 steaks like a professional saute cook can and hit, medium rare or medium, whatever temperature they want, day in and day out. So when you go and you spend $150 on 10 to 12 filet mignons, and you're having, one shot of making this dinner party, then yeah, sous vide makes sense, because that last little bit of like thing that you're missing because you can't perfectly pan roast or perfectly grill your steak is obscured by the fact that you just executed 12 perfectly mid-rare steaks in your house and they came out still delicious, right? So sous vide is not bad. And what we're talking about here is personal preference. So sous vide is great for overall execution. All right.
Top Feed Coco would like to know, what do pro chefs actually think about how Gordon Ramsay scrambles eggs?
About what?
How Gordon Ramsay scrambles eggs.
Oh, I don't think about it. I mean, I've seen how he does it. It's like there's just, again, people get... All right, so this is going to be the last answer, and then we're going to hold all the questions so we can kind of blow through this, right? And I'll make time for questions at the end. But as a chef who also creates content, which is also what Gordon Ramsay does, just at a much larger scale, right? Everyone's always looking for like, what is the like the cool approach for that sort of thing that's going to help people click, or also just personal preferences, right? So the way that Gordon Ramsay scrambles eggs is perfectly fine if you like, kind of soft, gooey eggs, which I do if I'm going to put it on toast, right? I would, I see him make his English breakfast. I would for sure smash, Gordon Ramsay's English breakfast. Scrambling the eggs for the fried rice, if they're too soft and they're too large, then they're not going to incorporate into the rice enough, right? So it's all about what's the end use. So I purposely kind of scramble the eggs a little bit harder, and I break them up as I'm scrambling. if I'm making like a side scramble for the restaurant, I'm going to fold it and kind of layer it a little bit more. So it all just kind of depends on what the application is and what's your personal preferences. Really, nothing's right or wrong. The only thing that's wrong is you not doing a technique because you're unaware of it, right? But the moment you're aware of the multiple techniques for cooking eggs, then the right way to cook those eggs is how you like them, because you're going to be the one eating them, or how your guest likes them. Like I could tell these people at table 12 all day long that Gordon Ramsay's scrambled eggs are technically the best in the world, and they're going to be like, yeah, cool story, chef. I still want mine over hard. Can I get my eggs over hard? Yeah, of course you can. You're paying. All right. So garlic oil into the wok. Shrimp goes in. Now, hopefully, we don't set off our fire alarm. I think this little butane burner is doing an admirable job. Yeah, and Mackenzie, if you just want to kind of make a list. Oops, we lost one. Make a list of questions that we can tackle here when there's a pausing point. So I'm just going to cook this shrimp until it's almost done. And then into this, I'm going to add, I'm going to bring our mise-en-place over here. We'll go ahead and add just a little bit of shallot, which is optional, and a little bit of minced garlic, which again is optional. For me, the only things that you really need in fried rice are egg and frozen peas. To me, that's fried rice. However, so my first introduction to fried rice was my Portuguese grandmother, who was born and raised in Hawaii. So she had like this kind of really cool fusion take on food. But she'd always serve steamed rice every night with dinner. And the next morning she would make fried rice, and she would just stir fry it up with some soy sauce. And that was it. And you serve it with some eggs. And it was delicious. Now the real secret to good fried rice is actually using leftover rice and drying it out properly. All right, so we'll just go ahead and put this on the same plate here, because everything's going to go back in the pool in a second. Give this a quick rinse. And back on the burner it goes. And we're going to go ahead and repeat this. I was trying this guy earlier when it was firing up. Not so much now. We're going to go ahead and repeat this with our scallions. And while we're waiting for this to heat back up, I'm going to grab a small mixing bowl here. And we're going to make our sauce for the fried rice. And again, so your fried rice can just be moistened with some simple soy sauce. But I like to add a little bit more to it. Now, I will not be giving you a recipe for this. And the reason why I won't be giving you a recipe for this is because I never use one, and you don't really need one, okay? We're going to build this based on flavor structure. So, here, I have some of our homemade chicken stock. At home, I just use the boxed chicken stock. If you're in the United States, I'm kind of partial to the boxed chicken stock that you get from Costco. Because again, it's the same as kind of like your white chicken stock, where you're not going to be able to really reduce it into anything super thick, but it's just there as kind of like a carrying agent for the other flavors that you're going to add to it. All right. So this goes back in. Now to this, and we're going to do this while I kind of do the green onions. The green onions go in. So to this, we're going to add some soy sauce for our salt and also umami. A little bit of hoisin sauce. So here's the deal, right? Oh, excuse me, the hoisin, and then your oyster sauce. Okay, so soy sauce is there for salt and umami. Oyster sauce is also there for that sort of like funky umami that you kind of get from like fish sauce and Worcestershire sauce. And then your hoisin is there for some sweetness. And then you're going to have your cooking wine there for just a little bit of sharpness. You can also add some vinegar to it as well. So when you're mixing this, just add a little bit of your oyster, a little bit of your hoisin. I already have the soy in there. I'm going to add some mirin, or excuse me, some Chinese cooking wine. Grab some tasting spoons. We'll give this guy, spoon's a little bit too big. We'll give this guy a quick mix. And we'll taste it. And if you want it to be a little bit sweeter, then add some more hoisin. If you want it to be a little more umami and funkified, you can add your oyster sauce. A little more salty, you can add soy. Now, I also, when we make this, you're going to notice I add some salt, some kosher salt directly into the rice because I find that adding enough soy sauce to bring up my seasoning level to where it needs to be is going to make it too soy-y, right? So a little bit more mirin, a little bit more soy. I'm going to go a little more hoisin. Oyster's fine. And again, what are we doing here? We're basically building a flavor structure. We're using the chicken stock as our carrier, right? And we're making a little bit more than we think we'll need because really you're only going to need a few spoonfuls. And then the rest you can just save for later when you're making a stir fry or something. Now, to me, that's pretty good. So what I want you to do is just take the ingredients and mix them till you taste it. You're like, oh, it tastes good. Again, you're looking for a little bit salty, a little bit sweet, a little bit funky from the oyster. Okay, you can put a little dash of MSG in there to play off the oyster sauce and the soy sauce. All right, so now we have our stir-fried ingredients. I have my frozen peas and carrots. Now, if you want, you can dice your own carrots after you blanch them to practice your knife skill dice. But I keep a bag of frozen peas and carrots at home specifically for the purpose of making fried rice, which we make a lot because we make a lot of steamed rice for dinner. And even though we're making shrimp fried rice here, fried rice is a great way to utilize any sort of leftovers you have. So if I'm making pork chops the night before, next morning I dice up the pork chops. One of my favorite things to do is when I make smoked ribs on the barbecue. The next day you take those smoked ribs, you cut them off the bone, you dice them up, you make a fried rice with it, and everything is basically, really quick and ready to go. Now, the real trick, I'm going to move this here for a second so I can talk about the rice. The real trick to fried rice is it has to be day old and it has to be dry, right? So you want to take the rice from your rice cooker while it's warm. You never want to make fried rice with warm rice, okay? You're just going to end up with a gloopy mess. You lay it out on a thin sheet tray, okay, or in a thin layer on a sheet tray. So this is the equivalent of 2 cups of uncooked rice, okay? So that's what 2 cups of uncooked rice cooked looks like. You lay it out, you put it in your fridge overnight, uncovered. And it's the exact same reason why you never want to put bread in the fridge, right? Because the cold temperature of the fridge will actually crystallize the starches in your bread and make it go stale. Well, we're using that same basic concept here to, number one, keep the rice from sticking to our wok, and number two, dry out the rice so that way when we add this moisture back in, the rice will readily absorb that moisture, okay? So you get the wok nice and hot. Everything else is ready to go. Again, we're using garlic oil. You can use light olive oil. You can use canola oil, basically whatever your favorite high temp cooking oil is. Don't use any of your good olive oils. It's kind of like using your good wine for cooking, right? The moment you introduce heat to a good olive oil or heat to a good wine, it kind of breaks apart that flavor. All right, so the rice is going to go in. Now, quick note, some people will kind of sit here and obsess about separating every single grain, which you can do. I find that's not super necessary. If you got some bigger clumps, you can break it up a little bit. But a lot of it's going to break up once it's in the wok itself too, especially if you laid it out in a thin layer. If this was a thicker layer, you might need to go, might need to work harder to break it up. So rice goes in. And we'll go ahead and start breaking these guys up. And you can see we have a nice non-stick surface. When I was a kid, I used to love the idea of fried rice. So I would make it at home, but I'd always just make it straight from the rice cooker. And it'd always be a gloopy mess. I'd wonder why I could never get it like the restaurants got it. And that's why. It always sticks to my wok too, or whatever pan I was using. But again, you can see here, we got a nice non-stick surface. I'm going to go through and kind of break up these bigger clumps. And you can hear by the sizzling of the wok, the temperature isn't ideal. I wish that this wok was a little bit higher. I could move it over to our professional stove here, but I don't really think that's going to be necessary. I think we're going to make it work right here, so it's more forward facing. But just so you know, when I'm at home in my home kitchen, I can get my wok to be a little bit hotter than this. But that's also too why you want to always do things in batches and then combine everything right at the end. Because the more you load up this wok, the more heat you're going to lose and the longer it's going to take for that wok to recharge. All right, Mackenzie, you got one quick question for me?
Deb would like to know if you have any advice from going as a sous chef from going to casual dining, or from dining to casual dining is what she said. Advice for a sous chef going from dining to casual dining and how to approach her team.
Wait, so she's a fine dining chef?
I think that's
going to casual dining?
I think that's what she meant, yeah.
I mean, it's much harder to make the switch from casual dining to fine dining. What's going to be necessary is when you go from fine dining to casual, is you're just going to have to realize that you can still apply the same general perfectionism that you learn in fine dining. But Mackenzie, can you hit me with the main cam?
Main cam? Yes.
Yeah. You're gonna learn the same sort of general, or use the same general perfectionism as you would in fine dining to make something good. So I mean, you can take the same concepts that you use to make like a foie torchon and make an amazing burger with it, but you're not going to really attract A-grade talent, right? Because all the rock stars want to be in fine dining. So you're going to have to get really good at teaching people and fostering talent. That'd be my biggest advice. Everything else, you're going to be great at it. So here we're going to take our frozen peas and carrots. And we're going to go ahead and throw it in here again to sight. How much frozen peas and carrots do you like? I don't know. I like about that much, right? So again, it's not, you don't need to overcomplicate it. Kind of throw it in the mix. Take a look at it. All right, now before we add our sauce, we're going to add back in our other ingredients here. So add in our shrimp, scallions, our scrambled egg. Go ahead and mix this around. Now pay attention to the moisture content that added to your overall stir fry mix, and kind of listen to it, because if your stir fried ingredients are weeping moisture, if there's a lot of moisture on the plate when you add this in, you need to reduce that moisture out until you hear it sizzle before you start adding your finishing sauce, or else you're just going to have like a gloopy kind of mess. All right. Also, too, one of the nice things about making a fried rice at home is look at how chock full of yummy goodness this is, right? You can add as much or as little as you want. In a restaurant, I would have to charge you a lot of money for this, right? I can pick up a 2-pound bag of shrimp, right? $15 at the supermarket, and I'm using about a pound of shrimp here. All right. So you can add in all sorts of good ingredients and mix and match exactly how you like it. Okay. So right about here, we're going to start to add in our sauce. Now, the secret is you don't want to just dump all this in all at once, right? You want to just kind of sprinkle it in like you're seasoning with it and let it cook out and really incorporate and absorb into the rice, and then taste your rice and add more if necessary. So you can see I added a few spoonfuls. And again, also too, what's going to happen is if you add too much liquid, then it's going to pool at the bottom. It's going to sog out the rice that's on the bottom, and you're going to start to have sticking issues. So give that a stir. Now I'm going to add just a baseline of kosher salt to this. Stir it in. Because I don't want this to, when I go to taste to see if I have enough of my sauce in here for overall flavor structure, I don't want to be lacking salt, which is kind of going to throw off the perception of my flavor structure. All right, so give this a taste. So this right now could really use more of everything. I'm going to go through, I'm going to add more salt, or excuse me, more sauce. We're going to also add some more salt. Now, for those who cook a lot of stir-fried dishes, especially fried rice, one of the major ingredients that I am missing, and missing by choice, is white pepper. I think white pepper can be overbearing, especially in a fried rice. In some stir-fries, it actually adds the overall flavor structure. But if you're not getting that sort of like barnyardy funk that white pepper gives you in a fried rice, and you're missing that, then add a little sprinkle of white pepper. I actually, when I do use white pepper, I'll add it to my sauce because it's easier to disperse, right? White pepper itself is pretty strong stuff, and it's very fine. So if you're just sprinkling it in by hand or by spoon, you could very easily over sprinkle in the white pepper. So I'm going to cook this until the liquid fully dissolves. Kind of listen for that sizzling. Give it another taste. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. So I like the flavor on it. I just want a little more salt, and it's a little bit too moist for me. So I'm going to allow that liquid to cook out a little bit. And while we're waiting for that liquid to cook out, Mackenzie, hit me with another question.
What is the best herb for steak?
The what?
Best herb for steak.
The best herb for steak. Well, so herbs don't have an actual scientific function, right? So it's not going to help you cook your steak mid-rare, right? So an herb is purely flavor structure, which is subjective. Now, with that said, you don't want something too overpowering, You can use rosemary, right? But if you use too much, it's going to kind of perfume the whole thing like rosemary. For me, I love the classic of just crushed garlic and thyme while you're butter basting in a pan to finish. But any fresh herbs that you butter base with could work, and it all kind of depends on flavor structure. So if you do, like you could do like a basil, like a fresh basil and oregano compound butter, it's going to feel a little more like Mediterranean that you melted over the top, even though they don't use a whole lot of butter in Mediterranean food, but you guys get the idea, right? Thyme with garlic is going to be, sort of your classic French butter basting approach. Rosemary, you see a lot of like rosemary used on steaks in American restaurants. So it kind of depends what your overall flavor structure is. But for me personally, finishing a steak with butter, thyme, and garlic, it's really hard to go wrong. All right. So we'll give this guy one final taste. All right. And we are good to go. Kill the heat. This goes in. Throw this on a plate. And of course, my plate's way too small. That's okay. We'll pile it up. We'll make it work. And fried rice is one of those dishes where, I don't need to tell you guys this, but it's really, really good leftover. So this is one of those things I make in a big batch. Also, if you're a healthy eater and you track your macros, right? This isn't really bad if you're working out and you have a nice mix of lean starch and carbs together. You do chicken in here, you do shrimp in here, right? This is a good like midday meal. I love to eat this a couple hours before I go and do jiu-jitsu. And again, you can pack this in a Tupperware, take it to work with you. Pop in the microwave for a couple of minutes, and you're good to go. All right. I think if I do any more, it's just going to start getting messy. So if you wanted to, you could take our green onions from earlier that we cut on the thin bias, and you kind of scatter around the fried rice here, or you could just simply serve as is. Mackenzie, you want to come take a taste real quick?
Absolutely.
What do you think? Good?
So good. Hot. Yeah.
Now, keep in mind that I do actually pay her to say that, but it doesn't mean it's untrue, okay?
It's true.
This is one of my go-tos. And again, you nail your fried rice, right? You get good at fried rice. It's the perfect vehicle for leftovers. And you make this for breakfast on like a Saturday or a Sunday morning. You want to talk about being a superhero to your family. Who doesn't like fried rice for breakfast, especially when it's made from scratch? All right. So I think what we're going to do next, I did have another fried rice planned, but for sake of time, we'll see how people feel after this next dish. We probably could have just done a whole show over one fried rice. But that's just, that's how we like to rock and roll sometimes. We're learning here. Let's go ahead and make that stir-fried chicken. Do we have any of those steel scrubbing pads over here? Mm-hmm. Grab me a steel scrubbing pad. I got to scrub out my my wok real quick, just because it's gonna stick if I don't. So we'll get that guy scrubbed out. So when you're cleaning your woks, you have like wok brushes and things like that. You just don't want to use a ton of soap, especially like soap detergent, because it'll take off the seasoning of the wok. Some people are really hardcore and they don't want to scrub it at all. Honestly, I feel a little metal scrubby pad hitting the exterior or the interior of your wok just to get some of the schmutz off is totally cool. So Give this a quick little scrub. Stick that down here. All right, so again, the main takeaway for this stir fry is the technique of your alkaline marinade and how you're actually going to stir fry things in batches. So this doesn't have to be chicken breast. It could be any sort of lean meat. You can do fatty meat too, but the fatty meat kind of doesn't necessarily work as well. Also, fattier meat tends to be tougher, right? But like if you take like a ribeye and you slice it thin and do like a broccoli beef stir fry with it, it will be like the best broccoli beef ever, especially if while you marinate. So if you take one of the best dishes I ever made is I take a ribeye, cut it off the bone, take that bone, roast it, make a pressure cooked stock, reduce that stock to about a couple of tablespoons, add in my seasoning to the liquid, and then make a stir fry, like kind of a play on a broccoli beef with a ribeye. Now, you'll never get that in a restaurant because they'd have to charge you like $70 for a plate of broccoli beef, which no one in the right mind is ever going to pay. But it's absolutely delicious. Again, that's why it's fun to kind of know these techniques and to cook at home, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to stir fry this stuff up. Again, we're going to stir fry everything in batches. How are we looking on that chicken stock over there?
Chicken stock, it's got like 20 minutes on it.
Got 20 minutes on it?
Oh, just kidding. 12 minutes. I can't read.
12?
Yeah.
So the chicken stock was more just to get you guys' mind going on workflow. Obviously, we had some chicken stock already made and ready to rock in the fridge. But as I wanted to give you guys a more holistic approach to, going to the store, buying some vegetables, buying whole chicken, give you an excuse to break down a whole chicken, make a stock, right? And for me at home, the chicken itself is a bit of a workhorse because you can do so many different interesting things with the various parts. You can save your chicken wings and have chicken wings, for parties or for just a snack. But the real purpose is the stock. So a lot of times too, when we're just when we're rushed for dinner, I'll have my wife. I'll give her a call as I'm leaving work, and she'll make a pot of white rice, and I'll stop by the store and grab a couple of like rotisserie chickens that we'll just pull the meat off of and eat that with rice. We'll eat it with like salads. You can take the rest of the pulled meat and like turn it into a pasta dish the next day. But then I have those bones, and those bones will go in the pressure cooker. I'll make a stock, and then if I'm getting long on my stock, right, I can freeze it, or also I can make a double stock. So I can take my last batch of chicken stock and use it to start my next batch. So in this dish, we're basically going to do some stir-fried green onions again because I love stir-fried green onions. We're going to save the chicken for last. And then we're going to do the exact same sauce just to keep things simple. So I'm going to bulk this sauce up just a little bit. And again, so this is a time when it is nice to actually have homemade chicken stock, because I find that you get the cleanest stir-fry flavor when you don't actually have to use a starch thickener for your sauce. Now, just to demonstrate, we will be using cornstarch in this sauce, but just the tiniest amount. And we're going to use the natural gelatin in our homemade chicken stock and that cornstarch to thicken. But my ideal approach is actually take a homemade roasted chicken stock or a white stock, and for stir fries, reduce it down till it's, what we call nappe, where it's just, barely coating the back of a spoon, and then build a sauce on top of that, omit the starch thickener itself, and you just have a much, much cleaner flavor that way. All right, so garlic oil goes in to the hot wok, portobello mushrooms. Now, the fact that I chose portobello is just kind of arbitrary. We had them. They looked good. You could use fancier mushrooms. You can go to like Whole Foods and get like their chef sampler mushroom packs, which makes things seem kind of like fancier. You can use cremini mushrooms, white button mushrooms. All right. And to this, we're going to add a little pinch of salt. That salt's going to help to draw out the liquid in the mushrooms and give me a little bit of a baseline seasoning. All right. Give this a little bit of a toss. Now, here's something that I like to do at home a lot, which is I will cover with a lid, right? We've got a little dirty here. So covering with this lid is going to allow me to steam these mushrooms. The mushrooms themselves are, Mackenzie, can I get camera two?
Yes.
Mackenzie's over there furiously jotting stuff down, so I assume it's just you guys asking lots of questions.
Yeah.
But she's forgetting to switch to my lovely face over here while
My
I'm
bad.
trying to pontificate on what I call steam charring. Yeah, you heard it here first, steam charring. So, and this actually comes from the pure lazy sense of me not wanting to blanch my vegetables before I stir fry, which is kind of more of a classic approach. Now, of course, you don't normally blanch mushrooms, but like I even do this with bok choy. Only thing I won't do it with is green beans, only because green beans themselves tend to get a little bit fibrous if you don't blanch them first. But I'll throw them in the bottom of a hot wok, season them, cover them. That steaming will, in a dry environment, will pull out the natural juices in the mushrooms or the vegetable itself, and then those juices will contain sugars, and the sugars will caramelize and kind of char and almost reduce and glaze directly on your vegetables themselves, giving you a really nice flavor and concentrating the flavor overall. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just scoot over, turn this guy on. So I'm not getting the best temperature from this guy, but we're experimenting, right? So there's some better butane stoves out there that would be plenty hot. So we're just going to have to order one of those. All right. In the meantime, we're going to go back through. We're going to doctor this sauce up again. Okay. A little bit of hoisin, a little bit of oyster. Now, this sauce itself could really be anything that you want. You use your chicken stock base. So you could easily throw in like honey, garlic, and ginger. Now you have a honey, garlic, ginger glaze, right? So any sort of flavor structure. This sauce itself, if you follow my F-Step curriculum, we talk about the three modern mother sauces, which are a technique-based approach to sauce making, which is if you understand the technique of reduction, puree, and emulsification, you can really make any sauce you want because you just paint the flavor structure over that sauce. And you know, in each section, we basically talk about the best practices for each sauce. So this would fit in the reduction category because we're going to basically be thickening by reducing, and you thicken through reduction by concentrating particulate matter. So it doesn't matter if that particulate matter is bits of gelatin, bits of protein, bits of starch. You're concentrating and reducing out the liquid or the water to concentrate that overall flavor and to thicken your sauce, right? So before I add my cornstarch to this, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a taste. Pretty good. Bring this guy back over here just on a hotter flame. We'll go ahead and take a peek. So you can see it's cooked down a lot. Started to char a little bit. So again, that char is basically these mushroom juices that are being extracted by steam and then charring on the bottom of the wok and then sticking to the mushrooms, just giving it a really good flavor. And then I'll press this down a little bit, not to smash, but to kind of spread it out into an even layer. And we'll cover again and kind of continue with the charring. Excuse me for a second while I grab a couple more plates. Let's see. We'll do one of these guys, one of these guys, and possibly one of these guys here. All right. Mushrooms are looking pretty good. Go ahead and put those off onto the plate, onto the side. Put this back on, and let's give this a quick wipe. At home, I'd be using a paper towel to wipe out my wok. Here we have a linen service, so I don't have to worry about washing my towels. I just throw those in the bag, they wash them for me. Okay. Wok is nice and hot. Next, we're going to char our onions. So green onions going in. But just before, quick little saute. Tiny bit of salt for baseline seasoning. All right, Mackenzie, let's take another question.
All right. Let's see.
Make it a good one.
Yeah. For Moroccan, Egyptian, and Turkish cooking, do you have any like resources? They want to do a dish, a Moroccan lamb shank.
Oh yeah, so check out Murad, the Murad cookbook. That's one of my all-time favorite Moroccan cookbooks, and I believe they have a they got lots of lamb recipes in there. Also, too, his Moroccan tomato jam is awesome. I totally ripped it off from him. I use it all the time in various things. We do sort of like a Moroccan bruschetta, where we just kind of use Moroccan flavors as we make our bruschetta mix, and we spread a crostini with Moroccan tomato jam that comes straight from his book, and people absolutely flip over. It's really good. So yeah, the Murad cookbook, he I believe was the first Moroccan Michelin-starred chef in the United States. And Murad is located in San Francisco.
How do you spell that?
Off the top of my head, I believe it's Mourad. Okay, so now we have our charred ingredients ready to rock and roll. Now we have our chicken. So chicken goes in. Now, normally when you're using this style of a marinade, you can mix in more more cornstarch, and you would first fry it at a low temperature to set that outer coating, right? And that's called velveting. So what we're doing here is basically the velveting process, but we're skipping the fried chicken or the frying portion. And that's two reasons. Number one, it makes it a little bit healthier, but also too, at home, I don't want to get out a pot of oil and set it up every single time I want to make a stir fry just because I want it to be juicy. So I've been playing with this for a while now, and this itself works really well. The cornstarch and the egg whites still set. When you put them into a hot pan, they brown nicely, becomes nice and fragrant, and you don't have to go through the whole process of actually cooking it in oil. Now, again, both egg white and baking soda are alkaline, so it raises the pH, which causes a couple of things to happen. Number one, it tenderizes the meat. Number two, the meat browning, what we call the Maillard reaction, is based on pH level. So it will actually brown faster and more evenly, which is also ideal when doing a stir fry, especially on a home burner. Okay, and because it browns more evenly and faster, number three, it actually make it more fragrant. As we know, about 70% of our taste comes from our sense of smell. So overall, it's a really good thing. Once I learned about this specific approach, so how you raise the pH when marinating meat, we started actually incorporating that into our brines. So all of our brines that we do here at the restaurant, if you ever work for me, we call it the alkaline brine. So it's 5% salt, 3% sugar, 0.5% baking soda by the weight of the water. And that's what we use to brine all of our stuff. All right, chicken stock is done. I'll address that here in a second. We'll go ahead and give this guy a little bit of a flipperoo. So don't worry too much about this stuff sort of sticking together, because you can break it up as you go. Now with that little flip, it kind of cooled off a little bit too fast. So I'm going to go ahead and move that over here while I turn off this stock. Let's see. Yeah, I think that should be good. We'll bring this back over in a second. Right now, I'm just kind of browning, getting this pan a little more charged with heat here. All right, let's take another question.
Does it matter what rice you use in stir fry?
Yeah, so for me, I like either a, my overall preference is medium grain Calrose rice. That's my go-to. Nothing else really tastes the same. And a lot of Chinese restaurants will actually use long grain rice, which is fine. Some people will use like a jasmine. I tend to stay away from basmati for fried rice only because it's a little bit too fragrant. But yeah, everything I use is Calrose medium grain rice. All right, let's move this guy back over here so we can get a shot of it. So you're going to have a little bit of sticking and charring, but that's okay because we're going to go ahead and take care of that. Now also too, if I was able to get this wok a little bit hotter and really fully charge it, we would have had more of a non-stick surface. So when I'm cooking this at home, it doesn't give me such a hard time as it is right now. But that's okay because all these little brown little nummy bits, people who watch my other videos, you'll just recognize that as what we call a fond. That will just be incorporated into our stir fry. We'll go here and we'll just kind of deglaze with a little bit of touch of water to clean things up before we add our sauce here, which I'm also going to right now take the opportunity to mix in just the smallest amount. For a second there, I thought that was baking soda by accident, but it's not. It's cornstarch. Because again, I don't want my sauce to be super starchy. But just the smallest amount is going to add a little bit of particulate matter to it. Really, the correct tool for this is a whisk. Unfortunately, I only have industrial-sized whisks. Well, still work. Just a little awkward. All right. So at this point, the chicken is pretty well cooked. I'm going to add just a little bit of fresh chicken stock to deglaze. You could use wine. You could use water. I don't want a whole lot of wine flavor in this sauce itself. So I'm just adding some chicken stock. I'm adding just enough moisture to release this fond from the bottom. So the lack of heat on this guy is going to be an issue. So I'm going to move this over here for a second. I'm going to grab a camera. All right, little dark, not ideal, but you guys kind of get the picture here. Oh, it doesn't look that bad. All right. So you can already see it's much hotter, right? So I was able to release the fond. And that right there really just shows you how important temperature is in overall stir-fry cooking, right? So now we're going to go ahead and add in our charred green onions and our mushrooms. go ahead and flip that around a little bit. Add in our basic stir fry sauce. Now remember, you can always add more if you need to. So I'm going to add maybe about half. So I don't want my sauce ratio to overpower my actual ingredients here. You can also see too, it's a lot easier to give this a flip when the burner is at the appropriate height. Add a little more sauce in here. So I think that's good for the sauce. I'm going to go ahead and just let that reduce out and fully thicken and cover my chicken. Get cleaned up here a little bit for our final presentation. Now for garnish, chili flakes, togarashi, sesame seeds, more green onions, all will work. All right, let's go ahead and cut over to camera 2. And then I think we'll go ahead and use, whoa. We'll use this plate here. Have a nice little earthen plate. Clean up my little spill there. So this served with some steamed rice. Really quick, easy meal. Now also too for meal preppers, what I'll do a lot. So this works great for tri-tip, right? So you can slice up tri-tip. It works great for pork loin or pork tenderloin. Obviously chicken breast, chicken thigh. So on the weekends, I'll cut up a bunch of vegetables and I'll cut up a couple different kinds of meat. And I'll marinate the meat, and it's just going to get better over time. So I'll do this alkaline marinade on the meat itself. And then anytime during the week, I just pull out a pack from the fridge with some already prepped vegetables, or I can cut some vegetables up real quick, and I can make a really quick, easy stir fry. So that with a little bit of a steamed rice is a great dinner. So because this is kind of brown, we're going to add a little bit of color to this. I took our wide shot away, so just bear with me here. So I think all of our spices are new for this kitchen. So I've yet to actually break into some of them. But I'm thinking just a little bit of white sesame seeds. And then we'll also do a little bit of these spicy chili threads, just to give it a little bit of a kick. And also the chili threads will give it a nice little color. And then also too, I'm a big fan of togarashi. You can put, which is like a Japanese 7-spice mixture. And you can put togarashi on just about anything, even though, like, you know, we're kind of leaning Chinese with this, or American Chinese really, with this stir fry. But, you know, it's all about the flavor structure and how you like it. So anyways, that's a really quick, simple stir fry for you. And again, the technique is the technique. The flavor structure is the flavor structure. I mean, you serve this with some shrimp fried rice. I mean, you want to talk about a good meal. Pretty quick. A lot of the stuff you can prep ahead of time, right? You can even scramble your eggs ahead of time and have it kind of sitting out. So the whole idea with mise en place, which means everything in place, but specifically for stir fries, is you can have it all set and ready to go in your fridge. And then right at the last minute, you know, about 15 minutes till you're ready to eat, you just fire it up and you're good to go. So I think we'll save the XO fried rice for another time. Mackenzie, you want to come and take a bite of this chicken?
Yes, I do.
Move this camera here. How is it? Good?
Mm-hmm. I don't even like mushrooms. But
she doesn't even like mushrooms, but we made a convert of her. Mm-hmm. So, and again, it's only going to get better and more tender the longer you let it sit. And also, too, let's not pretend here. Chicken breast is super boring. It dries out really quick, right? This is not dry or boring. In fact, really my favorite way to eat chicken breast, unless it's like really plain because I'm on a diet and I'm, you know, trying to cut weight, is stir frying it, right? Because this gives you the most moisture, the most flavor, and allows you to really paint colors over the top, or paint flavors over the top. All right. Well, I think for our very first live stream in our lab, studio kitchen, we did pretty good. Lots of fun. We're still kind of learning the ropes. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. At this point, I will open it up to questions. So we can go ahead and hammer some of those out. I'm going to turn off the hood here real quick so I can hear Mackenzie better. Oops, that was the hood light. So we're turning the hood off. Grab a bottle of water here. All right. Yes. So Mackenzie's just right there, but I have this hood behind me, you know, professional grade hood. Sucks up all the smoke, and it's kind of hard to hear her over it. All right. So hit me with it.
All right. So one question is, somebody just asked, overbrining with baking soda makes the protein mushy, right? Is what they said.
Yeah. So but that's really anything. You can over marinate with acid. You can over marinate with alkaline. But yeah, so it will. The thing is, though, is if you over brine with baking soda, you're not really going to have that much of an issue with proteins. What you will find it is, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and take this off. Where you are going to find it is, so there used to be some chefs that would put baking soda in their blanching water, and because what destabilizes green vegetables is green vegetables are slightly acidic. When you put them into a pot of water and you're blanching them, the acidity diffuses into that pot of water and actually destabilizes the hydrogen molecule at the middle of the chlorophyll molecule, which then makes it turn like a drab green. All right, so to counterbalance that, you could add baking soda, which raises the pH. So you'll notice that your vegetables will be brighter green, especially vegetables that you have to cook for a longer period of time. Let's say like some Brussels sprouts. But you run the risk of them being soapy and also mushy because baking soda does break down the cellular structure of vegetables. However, over brining or over marinating meat with baking soda will make it taste soapy before it gets mushy, in my experience. So when we were doing the baking soda on this, you could see I added just the smallest amount of a sprinkle, and I add it after I add the egg white, because the egg white is basically dissolving the baking soda and allowing for even distribution across the meat. However, when you're going to make a green puree, use baking soda in your blanching water, because you want to use the fact that it helps to keep it green longer, and the fact that you want your vegetables to be softer to puree. So if you're making like a bright green asparagus puree, you take that green asparagus, you blanch it in some water with a little bit of baking soda. It's going to make it softer because it's going to keep it green longer. So then when you blend it, it'll blend up easier and smoother. You pass it through a chinois, and you have a nice, bright, green, smooth asparagus puree.
All right. Top Feed Coco would like to know, what is the boot camp and how does that work?
All right. So we have the Stella Culinary Boot Camp, which is it's a 5-day cooking course that I developed about 8 years ago. I believe that people are really kind of taught how to cook completely wrong, as far as when you learn how to cook, especially like even in culinary school, right? It's like, here's this classic recipe, here's this classic sauce, here's this classic dish, make this, make that, make this. You open up your recipe books at home, you make a bunch of different recipes. And these recipes kind of turn into like these magical formulas that you feel you have to follow. And then over time, if you do enough recipes, enough time, and you get enough experience, then you start to make natural linkages between technique and flavor structure and things like that. My argument is I can teach you how to cook at a much higher level, much faster, by breaking you down to the bare first principles of cooking, which are flavor structure, sauce, technique, execution, and preparation, which I call the 5 F steps. And also, too, that's the same way that I approach a dish. When I'm creating a dish, you always start with flavor, right? And a big component in flavor is your sauce. So the sauce gets its own little separate section in F step. And then once you understand what your flavor and your sauce are going to be, it's time to go through your technique and then your execution and your preparation. Now, I explain this all in more detail. If you go to stellaculinary.com and you click on the bootcamp link at the top, or also if you're just on my YouTube channel, which you are right now, because you're watching this, in the banner, there'll be a link to my culinary bootcamp. So you can actually, we're hosting a live in-person bootcamp this October here in our lab. It already sold out when I released it. It sold out in less than 9 hours to 12 students, which is max capacity. But I recorded my lectures where I go through all the different techniques and flavor structure and the science behind that stuff at a previous boot camp. And you can purchase that at stellaculinary.com. So that'll kind of give you a better idea. And if you just search my YouTube channel for F-Step, you'll see some videos pop up, or Culinary Bootcamp, and you'll get more information there.
All right. Michael has got 2 questions. He wants to know how to get notified for the live streams. And then he is also curious about where the name Stella came from.
So if you click that little bell button at the top of my page and you're subscribed, you may or may not get notified. I don't really know how YouTube works with that sort of thing, but that's a good first step. And then follow me on social media, at Chef Jacob on Twitter and Facebook. I'm not the biggest fan of Facebook, but we have a nice Facebook group over there. So if you go to facebook.com/group/Stella Culinary, I post some stuff in there. Really the best, when we start doing these on a regular basis, I will be sending out an email newsletter. And I already have one. So if you go to stellaculinary.com, you sign up for the email newsletter. That's where I notify people when we release boot camps, when I release new videos, but it's all content driven, right? So the only time I try and sell you something is when I release like a new boot camp thing. So if you want to come to the boot camp, you can, come in and buy the boot camp ticket or buy the online course. Outside of that, you're getting notified when a new video is released, or new podcast release. I did not send an email to my newsletter today about the live stream because I was battling all day to see if I can even get this live stream up and running. We're kind of like up, against it. But once we find our flow, we're going to pick a time and a day each week to do these live streams. And I'll be announcing that through the email newsletter and also through social media.
All right.
And so Stella, so way back in the day, long story short, I felt that there was a gap for technique-driven information online for culinary arts. This is back when I was a sous chef, and it was about 2006, 2007. I had just bought my first Mac. They had this thing called a podcast app on there, where you could pretend like you were a radio show host, which I actually have always loved talk radio. So I got a mixing board, a microphone, and I started a podcast called Free Culinary School. And the idea behind Free Culinary School was basically I was going to, through the podcast, teach you what I learned in culinary school. So podcast 1 was knife skills. Podcast 2 was stocks. And you can go to Stella Culinary. You can still find those original podcasts today that I rebranded as Stella Culinary. So later on, when I was hired as opening chef of the Cedar House Sport Hotel, which had a small restaurant called Stella, I was ready to change my brand from Free Culinary School, because even though I offer a lot of content for free, I didn't want to be seen as like a free resource. It kind of, at the time, it sounded good, but it seemed almost spammy. So I wanted to sell stuff, right? I do want to make some money. So I changed it. I co-branded it with them as a Stella Culinary. And we used it to sell cooking classes and things in our shoulder season, because Stella was located in Truckee, which is right next to Lake Tahoe. And Tahoe is very seasonal. So in our shoulder seasons, at the end of winter and the end of summer, we would shut down and we would do my culinary boot camps. And we'd also do cooking classes throughout the summer and the winter. And to generate interest in that, I basically started creating a bunch of YouTube videos that we call Stella Culinary. And then after going through the whole rebranding, and then I was at Stella for almost 6 years. When it was time to leave and move on, the agreement was always that Stella Culinary, the content that I created, was always going to be mine. And so I thought about rebranding it to Chef Jacob or whatever, but at that point, it was just too much of a hassle. Right now, if you go to Stella Culinary, it links to most of my stuff. But everything online, even my YouTube channel, is youtube.com/Chef Jacob, it's youtube.com/Jacob Burton. So it's either Chef Jacob or Jacob Burton. So you search for that. That's where most of my stuff is. But that's where Stella Culinary came from. And I like the name even more now, because it was a really cool part of my growth as a chef. And Patty and Jeff, who own the Cedar House and started Stella, they just recently sold it. But it was really cool of them to let a young chef sort of pursue content marketing and content creation and leverage that to create what you see now today. And also too, it's one of the reasons, it's one of the driving forces behind my career as a chef, right? If you really want to master something, you teach it. And for forcing myself to come up with new content and to teach it in video format and podcast format really forced me to dive deep into the hows and whys of cooking, so I can relate that in a clear sense to you, right? So it really made me a much better chef too. And I really have Jeff and Patty to thank for that. So.
Cool. Joe says, I'm a high school culinary instructor. What advice would you give students interested in the hospitality field?
That's pretty broad, really the best advice I could give you is just start, right? Like you can work your way up in hospitality so quick just by being reliable, dedicated, and pure with your intent, right? So if you really desire to be a good chef one day, and you show that through your work ethic, you show that through your dependability, right? You show whoever you're working for that they can count on you to show up on time and to follow the policies and not cause problems, not cause drama. Because even when you first start, right, those are the building blocks. You're not going to be good at your job. You're not going to be a good cook. But the chef who hires you, they're not expecting you to be a great cook, right? From the start. Anyways, they're just looking for somebody that they can train, right? Same thing with the broader hospitality field. Here we're in a large hotel, so you interact with hospitality people all day long, and there's a lot of just base level hospitality. Kind of people get into hospitality by accident because it's a good way to pay the bills. When you're going to school or when you need a summer job, and they kind of catch that hospitality bug. Some people migrate to the front of the house, some people to the back of the house, depending on personality and what you want to do. But I've had I've had cooks come to me with zero experience. They start as dishwashers. A couple months later, they're doing prep. 2 years and 2.5 years later, they're salaried sous chefs because they're dedicated and they spend the time to put in the effort. So really, if you want to break into the field, the short answer is just start. Go get a job at a restaurant or a hotel, depending upon what part of hospitality you want to be in, and just learn as much as you can. Keep your head down. Stay out of the drama, right? Absorb things like a sponge. Unfortunately, there's different levels of professionalism in the hospitality industry. So if you find yourself in a kitchen or a restaurant that lacks professionalism, a lot of hostility, a lot of people not taking their job seriously, then move on, right? But also absorb the most amount of information that you can and take the lowest paying jobs that you can for the longest period of time you can sustain. And when you're just coming out of high school, you can do that because you don't have a family and a mortgage and all those sort of things. One of the best things I ever did was I started off working for free as an unpaid intern. And from there, if you pay me $1 an hour is more than free, right? So I spent the first few years of my career choosing where I was going to work based on how much knowledge I was going to gain, not how much money I was going to make. And now later on down the line, those job opportunities that will make you a lot of money are open and available to me because I laid that firm foundation. Once you get 10 years into the hospitality field and you have a little bit of an ego based on your title and your position and how much you're making, it's really hard to humble yourself and take a step backwards. And I see it a lot with people who have been in casual dining for 10, 15, 20 years, and they get into a fine dining scenario because that's what they've always dreamed of. And they have a real hard time humbling themselves and learning the basics again, because a lot of them really do need to learn the basics again, because the way they did things in a casual atmosphere just don't fly in fine dining. So just start based upon how much you're going to learn, not how much you're going to pay, and kind of live at that simple poverty level, learning as much as you can for as long as you can, because then when the day comes where you actually need to take a step up and go after that higher paying job, then you'll be ready for it. Or you can come work for me and I'll pay you well and put you through a whole training program. So you have that too.
It's true.
Yeah. Mackenzie's, she's proof of that. All my sous chefs are. Yeah. What else we got?
All right. Paul would like to know about the dried peanut butter.
Oh, the dried peanut butter.
Yep.
So if you go back and you watch my boot camp videos, my lectures, you'll notice that I'm about 100 pounds heavier in those videos. And during COVID, I decided once and for all to lose my weight and to get in shape. And it all has to do with calories in, calories out. And I discovered this is called PB Fit. It's basically a powdered peanut butter that's low in fat, high in protein, and you rehydrate it with a liquid, usually just water. And it's really good. So you can, peanut butter is kind of one of my guilty pleasures. Take a spoonful or two and eat it. But when I started working with the stuff, I found I love putting it in smoothies and shakes, but also it makes some mean peanut-based sauces. So you can do a Thai-style curry with this. You can use it to thicken sauces. It's really good. And so anyone who's kind of played around with dehydrated peanut butter, where you can take peanut butter itself and you mix it with tapioca maltodextrin, which is a lightweight tapioca starch that will absorb fats. That's kind of how they do this, but I don't think they actually use maltodextrin in here. They might. Yeah, so just organic peanut flour, however they make that, organic palm sugar, and salt. So there's a little bit of sugar in here, but the macros on it are really good. It's like 5 grams of total carbs, 8 grams of protein per serving. So it works out nicely. This, I'll do this on some toasted bread with some sugar-free jam and a chocolate protein shake. I feel like a little kid again. What else we got?
Loaded would like to know how the restaurant business has been this year.
For us, fantastic. It's been we've just been getting busier and busier. We were able to come back from COVID really quickly. We had a really strategic approach to the shutdown and how we were going to hold on to our team and stay in contact with them because we saw a massive opportunity for expanding back outward faster than our competition could. And it's, it's sad to see a lot of businesses struggling, a lot of businesses kind of hitting that downward death spiral where they're trying to cut costs. Inflation is tough, right? So we're constantly changing our menus and kind of restructuring things. But it takes a conscious, I have a large team. I have 9 salaried people that work for me, and then they have, together we have about 100 employees total in our department, both front and back. So but it takes a strategy of, hey, we're going to constantly be reprinting menus. We're going to be, dropping menu items, bringing on menu items, but making sure our guest doesn't feel that. So that's how we control our cost of goods sold. But we were able to basically increase our market share very rapidly. So we've never been busier. We're way far ahead of our benchmark year, which was 2019, on the revenues. It's a little bit harder to flow profits. It takes a lot more attention than it did back in 2019, but there's still plenty of profits to be made. So for us, good. And for, it's not the same for everybody, unfortunately.
All right. Paul would like to know how bocce's going.
Bocce is going great. We love bocce.
Yeah.
It's so for those who don't know, we have so we used to have a casino here back before this was the Renaissance Hotel. So it was, the Sienna Hotel, and there's a big casino. So we're non-smoking, non-gaming. We ripped out the casino, and we were left with 20,000 square feet. So what do we do with 20,000 square feet? Well, we put in 7 large bocce ball courts and a massive bar and lots of games. For those who haven't played bocce before, it's a lot of fun. We had the leading designer flown in from Italy who designed our bocce ball courts and installed them. So the action on them is really nice. And we have an extremely, extremely talented team over there. We just did a cocktail tasting. They launched their cocktail menu a few weeks ago. And what was really cool about that is all the bartenders have been with us for a while. They each kind of collaborated on their various drinks. And they had a lineup of drinks that was absolutely spectacular. So the cocktail program in bocce has always been good, but it's never been stronger. So if you're in the Reno area, I would come through and check out our cocktail program. They do a great job. And we have some great scratch-made pizzas that uses my New York style pizza dough, as well as some burgers and some other fun bar food. And what's nice about being the chef of a larger property like this with a couple of different outlets is it gives me a lot of creative release in multiple venues, right? When I was working just solely fine dining, I would have a great idea for a pizza or a great idea for a burger, but that doesn't necessarily fit on like a 5-course tasting menu, right? So you have to kind of put that in the back of your head. So having a casual restaurant like Boondocks Bocce and a little bit more of an upscale restaurant like The Shore, and then also our spaces like our private wine cellar where we do our high-end wine dinners, and now the R Lab, no matter what we want to do, no matter what we want to create, we're not actually limited by our venues, which is awesome. So as a chef, it's a lot of fun to work on this property because we have an outlet for really any creative idea that we have. Is that it?
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to the very first live stream out of our lab kitchen studio. For more information, you can check out stellaculinary.com. What I would recommend you do, though, is so go to stellaculinary.com, sign up for my email newsletter because that's where you'll get new content updates. But also subscribe to my YouTube channel. This is where I will promote do most of our stuff. I do plan on doing a lot more live streams here in the future. And then also go to your favorite podcasting app and look for the Stella Culinary School podcast. Download and subscribe to that. I haven't updated the podcast in quite some time, but I will, right? And when I do, we're going to hit our flow with it. We're going to be, I have ideas for, how I want to restructure it. The podcast was such an important part of what I did for such a long time that when we relaunched, I want to make sure I relaunch it with a clear vision, which is why I've been kind of holding off on it. Well, how do I want that format to really look like? What new content do I want to add? How often will I be doing it? Am I going to be doing video? Am I going to be doing just audio? So it's taking me a little bit of time to figure that out. But really, if you subscribe to this YouTube channel and you subscribe to my podcast and then the email newsletter, and then if you really want to take a deep dive into how to stop following recipes and start creating like a professional chef, check out my culinary bootcamp curriculum, which you can go and find at stellaculinary.com. click on the bootcamp link at the top of the page, and it'll give you all the information you need. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next time.